At forum. So
Yep,
why don't we wait another minute, Michael, you think, just to let a few more people. Michael, you are recording, I see.
I
Perfect.
am. Yes. Yep.
Okay. I guess we could wait another minute and then we can get started. Well, I would say we're on the hour, so why don't we get started because we have a lot to cover, right?
You got it. Yes. I will definitely won't be able to cover everything that I covered at Forum, because
Yeah.
we just have a shorter time block. But yeah, so at Forum, I basically did this tips and tricks where I was going over modules that don't get a lot of use. And I suspect it's because there's not a lot of knowledge about how these modules work or that they even exist. So the first thing I want to talk about is, and this is kind of something that a lot of chapters have touched on, but haven't really dove into, and that would be volunteering and organizing volunteers. And the way that Club Express does it is we break volunteers into two groups. So you have like long-term volunteering and you have short-term volunteering. And what I would consider long-term volunteering to be would be like if you're looking for people to join a committee or help out with the organization or the overall chapter operation for a long term, like a year, for example, then you would be considering long-term volunteering, whereas short-term volunteering would be like for an event, like if you need people to sit at a registration table for an event, or you need people to check people in, or clean up afterwards. There's a variety of different ways that we can handle that, but that's kind of the way we've organized it behind the scenes. And the way we do that is for long-term volunteering. We'll start with that first. So basically, we do it through the committees module or the interest groups. And so it just depends on your kind of preference for your chapter. But because both of them operate a little bit differently. So in the committees module, if we start with a long-term committee, let's say it's a nominations committee, then what people do is when you configure it so people can add or remove themselves. And when you do that, people can join that committee or leave the committee at their whim, which is kind of nice because it's very open and it allows people to kind of commit themselves to do it, but they know they're not committing for a year, 2 years, or some sort of a permanent commitment. So allowing them to leave and remove makes it a little more comfortable for them to be able to say, yeah, I'll help out. So we use the committees module for that. We create the committee and we set it up and members only. We can also allow emailing through the committee. So we would say, yes, committee members only. So if you're a member of the committee, you can very easily email other members of the committee. And then to add people to the committee, it's very easy. So an admin can go in and they can just click on this icon and they can click on add member and they can just select the member to be added to the committee. Or they can select even a non-member, because non-members can be part of committees, which is really unusual, but because we don't do a lot of interaction with non-members, but we do allow you to add non-members to committees. So we've got a nominations committee. But another way of handling that is no, oh, the other I guess the drawback of using committees is that nobody is going to get a notification if somebody joins a committee or leaves a committee. So there isn't like a central coordinator who says, oh, yeah, so I saw that Michael Fisher left our committee. Maybe I should reach out to him and find out why. However, we also use the interest group. And in this case, I changed the name of the interest group to long-term volunteer opportunities, because that's kind of the way, for this example anyway, that we're only going to use of interest module for long-term volunteering. So I'm going to click on it and I've created a category, and this one's called one-on-one individual chapter consults. But if I click on this icon here, these are the individual interest groups. So I've got one called Communications Committee. I've got one called Emerging Professionals Committee. And I can click on this icon and I can see who's on that committee. And as the admin, I can add people to the committee or remove people from the committee. I can also click on the pencil and I can see that I have the ability to select a coordinator. So that person is notified every single time somebody leaves this particular interest group or adds themselves to the interest group. So that kind of gives you that ability to get some notification that somebody has joined your group or left your group. One of the things that makes it very easy for people to join these interest groups or volunteering opportunities is they can do so through their profile. So if I go up to my profile and go down to it is under long-term, it's under your website functions, long-term volunteer opportunities. And if I look at that, I'll see all of the different interest groups that are listed, and they'll be listed by their category. And then I can just check or uncheck the box based on whether I want to join that group or not. The nice thing is that this can be made to be part of a new member sign up. So if I go to the People tab and go to New Member Sign Up, I can make sure that I'm including member interests as part of that. So I can say, well, when somebody new signs up, I want them to choose a group to get involved right off the bat. You know, they're hot to join the organization. They might as well be hot to join a group too and help out. And then you can also ask them to do so at renewal time as well. So here's another benefit of, I guess, our differentiator between the two of them. If I go to the website tab and go to the document library, I can configure a document library so that it is visible or accessible only to members of a committee. So I could say, well, yeah, I'm going to use this folder is going to be only available to the nominations committee. And then people can, on the nominations committee, can upload documents to it. They can read the documents in it. But anyone who's not in that committee won't be able to access that information. What you'll notice is missing is there's no interest group here. So there isn't a way to actually say this folder is only visible to that interest group. Another differentiator is when we go to the communications module and go to forums. Now, these are the discussion forums, right? So we can have discussion forums that are based on different settings. In this case, let's call it the communications interest forum. And it's currently set up for interest members, and it's the communications committee interest that we created. You can also create a membership based on committee members. So you can say, well, I'm going to go with NIGP, and it's going to be the nominations committee. So this is the actual committee. It's kind of confusing for training purposes because I've named them both committees. So the committees module has a committee in it, and then the interest group module also has groups that are called committees. So I can see that would be confusing. But in this case, we're talking about committee members can be part of this forum. And then only committee members would be able to see the posts, would be able to reply to posts, and maybe upload documents to the posts and that kind of thing. So they're part of the discussion, but other members would not be part of that discussion who are not part of that committee or part of that interest group. That makes sense? Seems like I don't see any hands, so that's good.
Yeah, no hands.
Okay, good. So the other thing we want to talk about is more short-term volunteering. Short-term volunteering is going to be more event-based volunteering. So let's say we have an event. I'm going to go down to our events here, click search, and I have a training event that I had created that is called, where is it? Test sponsorship for conference. So I've created this event. I've made it created a bunch of settings for this event. Now what I want to do is I want to get volunteers because this is a pretty large event. So I need some warm bodies to help me with it. I go to control panel, I go to people, and I go to the volunteering module. So this is a module we have built in for organizing volunteers. And the way we organize them is we create a volunteering opportunity, which is kind of, it's the event, right? The volunteering opportunity is the event. Within an opportunity, we create time slots. And time slots are just time periods and tasks that people are going to sign up for. So I have this test conference, and if I look at the time slots, which are the second icon there, I can see that I've created some time slots. So on the 24th from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., I need 4 people to help at the registration table. From 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., I need 2 people to help prepare the mid-morning snacks. From 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., I need 8 people to help with cleanup. So now I can create those slots, I can create the time periods, and I can create a description of what is going to be required. So at the registration table, I can put a description that says need 4 people to check attendees in and hand out bags. And then I can categorize it. In this case, I did physical tasks versus sedentary tasks, and this one's a sedentary task. So you can define it how you wish. As the admin, you can go in here and you can assign volunteers to it too. So you can be voluntold instead of volunteered for a different activity. The nice thing is when I'm configuring the event, now if I'm going to click on the pencil for this event and take a look at the configuration, I set the time period. I determine if this opportunity is going to be available to members or non-members. I can ask people a question and I can say, are you physically able to do this work, as a question. I can link it to an event. And in this case, I definitely want to link it to an event. And I'm linking it to the annual conference called Sponsorship for Conference. I could even set a location. So if this volunteering opportunity is a different location than the conference, or if there's no event that it's tied to, because it doesn't have to be tied to an event, you can set the location of where the volunteering is going to take place. And then you can also set automatic reminders to remind people to show up for their volunteering. So I can say 1 day before, 5 days before, and maybe 12 days before their time slot is to begin. So I've created it, I've linked it to the event. Now, if I go to the event and take a look at it, let's go back to this event. And if I just click on the eyeball to look at the event, my registration that says register now, registrants, but I have a new button here called volunteer. And as somebody who's registering for the conference now is my opportunity to say, I'm also going to volunteer. So I click on volunteer and it's saying full just because this happens to be in the past. It's August 24th. So it was a couple of days ago. But if it didn't, then it would be green. In fact, you know what? I can go back and change it here just so that you can see what it would look like. So I'm going to say this time slot is going to be, what's today? 27th. So we'll set it up for the 28th. And now when I go to the event and I click on that same thing and look at the volunteering, I can see I can volunteer myself, or as the admin, I can also volunteer others. I could say I want to add a family member who would be like a secondary, or I can add another member to the volunteering and say, I'm going to volunteer this person or voluntold them, whatever your preference. But if I click volunteer myself, I click on the hand and I choose which of my phone numbers that I want to be contacted by. And I can check the box and say, I'm going to help out at the registration table, click next, and it confirms the information, and then I finish. And I can see now there's only 3 spots left. So that's a great way to manage kind of short-term volunteering, things that are tied to events. And like I said, it doesn't have to be tied to an event, but it certainly is handy that it is there. Any questions about the volunteering module?
I don't see any
Nope.
hands up. Nope.
All right, good. So then we're going to talk about sponsorships now, because almost every single chapter is going to have a sponsorship going on. And very similar to volunteering, we kind of categorize sponsorships into long-term sponsorships, which might be like, sponsor my chapter for all of 2025. And there may be benefits to that, like saying, well, you're going to be on every table at every event, you're going to be on the website, or whatever, you're going to give them for their sponsorship. But you're also going to have short-term sponsorship opportunities, which will be tied to specific events. For example, like the conference, so you could be a sponsor for the conference. And so we handle them differently depending on how or what the duration is of the sponsorship. In a case of a long-term sponsorship, what I would recommend is that we go to the Money tab And all of you have this module called Storefront. If you don't have it, if you don't see it, click on the configure button that says blue handled wrench, and you'll see it on the left-hand side under disabled modules for this tab. So it'd say Storefront. And all you have to do is you'd click on it and you would make it active, click save, and then when you exit out, it will appear here under website modules. But this one's already enabled, so I'm going to click on Storefront. And I had already created a couple of sponsorships. So let's say I've got one called Gold Sponsorship for 2024 or Platinum Sponsorship for 2024. And when I configure them, we'll take a look at Gold here. I can provide a SKU, which gives me a way to be able to track it more individually. So maybe for 2025, it'll have a different SKU. I can put in a description and say what's included with your Gold sponsorship. And then I can also assign a price to it. And I can also assign a price for non-members. So if you're going to have different pricing for members versus non-members, for sponsorship, it's probably not going to be the case, but you can do that for other things as well. And because it's a storefront, basically you're selling a product. In this case, the product is sponsorship, but you have to have an inventory. We have to know how many of those you have. So for the gold sponsorship, let's say I'm limited to 2. You can only have 2 gold sponsorships for all of 2024. So I set the capacity or the quantity to 2, and I set the price, and you can set it both at the product level or at the inventory level. And now you can also include some images. So I've got an image for the gold sponsorship as well. What's it going to look like? Maybe create some really cool graphics to go with it. And then this icon is the description. So this is where you're getting the information about, or adding the information about what they get with their sponsorship. It includes exhibit space at the conference, 4 passes to attend the conference, prominent signage, logo, 24-pack of your favorite artisanal beer, whatever it might be. And then you provide that as part of the benefits for your sponsorship. And then the nice thing is that you would then create a link to your storefront page. And I didn't create that because this is the live NIGP website, so I don't want to mess with that. But I'm going to switch to view mode, which allows me to look at the storefront from the user's perspective, but as an admin behind the scenes. So I'm going to click switch to view mode, click on the storefront, and now I'm looking at the storefront module. So I can see my gold sponsorship. I can see my platinum sponsorship. If I click on it, I can add it to my cart. And you'll see that I have a cart. I don't know if you guys can see that over here. It says cart, and I have 1 item in the cart. I can check out. And when I go to checkout, I'm placing an order for myself. As an admin, I'm going to see these other options, place an order for another member, place an order for a non-member. But as a regular user, you're not going to see that. Continue with checkout, and then it's asking for additional information. So I can completely check out. In this case, you'll notice that the storefront itself, if I go back to control panel, let me go back this way and go to money, and then you'll see storefront is in test mode. And it's going to stay in test mode until you're ready to make it live. While it's in test mode, people can add things to their cart. They can check out. They can go through all of the steps, but the system is never going to accept payment. It's actually never going to generate a transaction behind the scenes. And it's great for testing because now you can play what if. If a person selects this, if they could select that, then you can play with it. But at some point, you're going to want to go live with it. And all you have to do is you either contact support. You can email support@clubexpress.com, or you can do the support phone number and contact them and say, I want to make my storefront live. And literally all we have to do is flip a switch here and it'll make your storefront live. And at that point, when somebody adds something to their cart and checks out, the system is going to expect payment. So that would be a good way of handling long-term sponsorships. For short-term sponsorships, we're going to use the events module. Now, I just learned this when I was at Forum. Reverse trade shows are a different animal than any other type of activity where you might have. So you could certainly have a regular conference that's not a reverse trade show. And in that case, you're going to create a separate event for vendors to sign up or sponsor the trade show. Actually, no, yeah. For sponsorship, you're always going to want to have a separate event. Well, no, that's not true. Okay, Sorry, I don't mean to be confusing you. For sponsorship, you're going to want to make it part of your event if it's a reverse trade show, because it's a reverse trade show is a different animal, which you guys all understand, but the light bulb just went on for me. So basically you have the attendees are people are NIGP chapter members. No. Ugh, it's so backwards. The people who have exhibit space, who have tables, are NIGP chapter people. The vendors or the people coming to the attendees are going to be vendors who are trying to sell you whatever they are selling. And they could also be sponsors as well. So they could be not only attending the reverse trade show as an attendee, but they could also be sponsoring as well to try and get better visibility at that reverse trade show. So in that case, you're going to want them to be a you're going to want them to be able to have an activity that they can select. So in this case, and this is my test that I did, it's a multi-activity event, and not only can they register to be attendees, but they can also get sponsorships. So in this case, I'm calling it gold or platinum, right? So just like the storefront one, we're talking about gold or platinum levels of sponsorship. And they can select it when they're registering for this particular event. However, if it's not a reverse trade show, then if it's just a regular conference, maybe your chapter has an annual conference, then I would make this part of it, the sponsorship part of it, completely separate from the registration, because attendees don't necessarily want to see sponsorship information. It can be very confusing to them. If you imagine, all the things that's involved with sponsoring or being an exhibitor at a conference, you're talking about booth space, you're talking about possibly electricity to the booth. You're talking about possibly different booth options, 10 by 10, 20 by 20, whatever it might be. You don't necessarily want the attendees who are signing up to attend that conference to have to make those decisions and potentially sign up for something they didn't intend to. So if you make it a separate event, one for vendors and sponsors and one for the attendees, then it makes it much more clear for everybody. But when you're setting up a sponsorship, let's talk about like gold exhibitors. Maybe gold exhibitors have some benefits, like they can take additional people too, bring along additional people with them. And so what they do is you set up a registrant type. So when I go to who can register for this, I can say, well, I'm going to set up a gold sponsorship. I'm going to set up a platinum sponsorship. I'm going to set up a silver sponsorship. And this is just for the sponsorship part of itself. So when I first start the event and say register now, I have to choose what my sponsorship level is. I'm going to say I'm going to gold sponsorship, I'm a platinum sponsorship, I'm a silver sponsor. And then when I go to gold sponsor, I'm only going to see those options that are available to me as a gold sponsor. So I know I can request additional t-shirts. I can request electricity. I can request additional worn bodies or exhibitors that are coming to me with my gold sponsorship. And I can see the gold sponsorship is pre-checked and it's grayed out, so you can't unselect it. So it makes it very easy for the person who's going through the steps to choose only what they need. And when I configured it in the activities and items, just so that like additional gold exhibitors, when I choose who can register, I'm only selecting the registrant type of gold sponsorship and then maybe a member guest. If I look at the platinum, let's say platinum sponsorship, I click on who can register. The only people who can register for it are platinum sponsors, the ones who selected that option when they first started the event registration. If I look at electricity for booth space and I click on who can register, we have gold sponsors, platinum sponsors, and silver sponsors. So all three of those. And then you can see different pricing actually for that. So somebody who's a platinum sponsor, they get free electricity. Whereas if they're a gold or silver sponsor, they have to pay for it. So it just depends on how you set that up, with your sponsorship benefits. That makes sense? Any questions?
No questions.
Okay. I know this is a very, very involved part of setting up events versus the storefront for sponsorships. So at any point, if you get stuck, contact support. They do this stuff all the time, so they can walk you through it. One of the other things that I wanted to cover too was, and this will be a really quick one, is if we go to the document library, and let's say we have a document here. And this document, documents are almost like living things, right? So they're changing throughout the year. So let's say I have a document and it's my bylaws document and it's linked from a custom page, it's linked from a couple of emails, it's linked from wherever. But that document changes, let's say mid-year. Rather than adding a new document to the document library and relinking all those different pages, if I click on the existing one that's already linked, all I have to do then is click this little checkbox, which is really, really easy to overlook. Click this box that says update, and you're going to see a new select button will appear, and you're going to select the new version of this document. And when you do, and you click save, it will have updated the document, and you don't have to change any of the links. So everybody who clicks on their existing links from the web page or from emails or wherever, they're going to get the most recent version of the document. I think that's something that people tend to overlook. It's kind of easy to overlook, actually. Okay, the next thing that we want to talk about then is going to be ad hoc forms and surveys. And if we go to Control Panel, go to the Communications tab, and we have two modules here, surveys and ad hoc forms. And if you look at them on their surface, they look to be very, very similar, and they kind of are. So what we're going to do is look at surveys first. And I've created a couple surveys here. One of the things that makes surveys unique is that you can configure them as an election, which means that when it's configured as an election, you can only take that survey once and once only. Whether you're an admin, you're a member, you must only be able to take it once. So when you're testing it, you don't get a lot of opportunity to play with it. You basically set it up. While it's in test mode, you can play with it and it won't save your results. But the moment you make it active, you can take it as the admin, you take it once, as a coordinator, you take it once, as a member, you take it once and once only, and that's it. So it prevents you from skewing the results. And it also makes it anonymous. So you can't tie the results to a specific member. You can't say, well, this member voted for this option, this member voted for this option. Everything's anonymized, whatever it is. Everything's anonymous. So that's the nice thing. But the surveys themselves, when you set them up, let's take a look at this one. This one, I actually called it election too late to configure as an election. So you'll see there's a button here when you first create it that says configure as election. It's grayed out. I can't check that button. So I know a lot of your chapters have elections coming up. And the important thing is that when you click on add survey to create a survey, that option is checked is right when you create it. If I click add survey, I'm checking configure as election. It's going to give you a warning when you configure it as an election. You cannot reverse it. Click OK. It pre-selects a lot of options for you, and they're grayed out, so you cannot change them. And then you're going to save it, and it's going to create that election, create that survey as an election. This one was configured too late, so I go to the pencil. That option isn't available to me. But now I click on the questions, and the nice thing about surveys is that you can have multiple pages of questions, and then you group all your questions based on what page it's stored on. So so basically, let's use an example of an election again. So if you have uh, election for different board positions, so you have a president position, a treasurer position, secretary position, then on page one, you could have all the presidential candidates and the question about who they're selecting. Page two, they could have the treasurer candidates and all the people they're selecting. It gives you a nice way to be able to organize the information. This particular one, properly configured as an election, if I click on the option, I can see that what it is checked. I can't uncheck it because it's configured as an election. I can see the questions that I've created. Who are the presidential candidates? And the way I set this up is I use heading instruction text. So if I click on the pencil, I put the candidates into a heading instruction question type. And basically all I'm inputting is text. So I'll say candidate one has been a leading figure, candidate two has been treasurer, candidate three is just a large smiley face. I have that way to be able to present the information. And then the second thing that I've created on that page is a select list question where they choose who is your vote, candidate one, candidate two, or candidate three. I did the same thing for the treasurers. So if I go back to this page and I click on the eyeball to take a look, see, I've already responded to the survey, so it won't let me vote again. So that's nice. So I'm going to put it back into test mode if I can. Test mode. Click on the eyeball. And this is the preamble. So when you're configuring a survey, you can create a preamble telling people this is the preamble for electing our next leaders. Please vote for your preference. You can only vote once. Click next. And you have the list. Remember, this is the heading panel. Candidate one, candidate two, candidate three. And then the select list question. Which one are you voting for? Click next. And then you do the same thing for the treasurer. So that's surveys. Now I want to talk about the same type of thing, but with ad hoc forms. So ad hoc forms, you'd never use this for elections because you don't. You don't have the option to enforce any type of an anonymity. You don't have a way to enforce, people only voting once or using it once. In this case, use ad hoc forms just to collect information. And a lot of the chapters have scholarships that they offer. And so this is a great way to have an online form to collect scholarship information. So in this case, I've created one called 2024 Scholarship. I can take a look at the questions and say which scholarship, maybe there's multiple scholarships available. So you can create a select list and say which one you providing, which one are you applying for, what information. You can have open-ended questions, you can have scale questions. And one thing that makes ad hoc forms unique is that you can also require attachments. So in here, I've created some instruction about an attachment. When we set it up, we determine if we're going to include attachments. That's this option here, attachments, yes or no. And when we say yes and save it, then we see this new box appear. It's this little icon that looks like a paperclip. And this is where we define the attachments. So in this case, we have a certification. What is the certification? And is it required or is it optional? And we can create other ones. So we can say, well, attachment number 2 is going to be some other doc. I don't know what it would be. And maybe that one's required. Click add, save. And now we've created another attachment. So then we can also create a preamble here too. And the preamble is just a description, what information do you want them to know before they actually jump into the form and start filling out information? So in this case, it says, this is the preamble. Please fill out this form completely. For every incomplete form we get, another turtle gets tangled in a discarded fishing net. So you can provide some sort of a loose threat to people to make sure they complete it properly. And then when we click on it, click on the eyeball, it looks very similar to the survey, except the preamble just appears at the top. Which survey are you applying for? So you've got different options. We're going to select one. The checkbox list, what are your certifications? If you could be any kind of tree, what kind of tree would you be? So all of these different things you can collect, but one of the big differences, like with surveys, you can have multiple pages, right? Page 1, page 2, page 3, president, treasurer, secretary, whatever it might be. With ad hoc forms, you get one page. And it could be a very, very long page, but you only get one page. So are there any questions at this point about surveys or ad hoc forms or the difference? When to use them?
I don't see any hands.
Okay, good. So let's talk next about mailing list categories, because this is another thing that I think people don't realize immediately, the power of mailing list categories. If we go to communications and click on mailing list categories, you're going to see a list of the ones that are built in, and then you can actually create additional ones yourself. And you can create unlimited mailing list categories. The ones that say NA in this column, those are all system generated ones. You cannot change them. You can't add to them. You can't delete them. But these you can. So I created one called I'm a Vendor. And I created another one called Membership in NIGP, because maybe I want to reach out to those people who I know are members of NIGP National, but not necessarily, but I may not know about it. You can also, with these ones that are built in, you can categorize people in different ways. And I'm going to show you one of the ways. Like, I'm going to go back to the volunteering module, click on volunteering, and let's go into our conference, click on the pencil. And I have an option here called mailing list category, and by default, it's volunteer. So the system is automatically going to take anyone who volunteers for one of these time slots, and it's going to add them to the mailing list category of volunteer. Now, one of the cool things is that you can create a mailing list category, and let's call it 2024 conference or 2024 annual conference, and then come here, and for everyone who volunteers for your conference for this opportunity, you just choose that new mailing list category, so that next year, when you're looking for people to volunteer for 2025 conference, you can go to this pool of people first and say, hey, the 2025 conference is open. You did a great job volunteering for 2024. Please click on this link and you can volunteer for 2025 as well. So it's a great way to get some volunteers, that low-hanging fruit, because they volunteered last year. And you can do that for so many different modules. Like for the events module, for anyone who registers for an event, I'm going to go back to my test event here. When I set it up under registration and fees, I can determine, actually in a multi-activity event, it's actually set at the activity level. So I can determine under registration fees under an activity, which mailing list no, that wasn't it. That's the financial account. Oh, here it is, mailing list category. Yeah, it's under registration and fees. And then I can say, well, by default, the system assigns event registrants, but I can say, well, again, I want these people to be 2024 annual conference registrants. So I have a list of those. I can identify them very, very quickly. And then maybe next year, when I have 2025 conference, I create a new mailing list category for the event registrants, and I call it 2025 annual conference registrants. And this way I have a way to be able to email them. Now you can manually add people to mailing list categories too. So, I mean, there's a lot of automated ways to do it, but you can do it manually too. So if I go to People Manager and I just get a list of members, this icon here that looks like stacked colored boxes is mailing list categories. So I can just click on that and I get a list of all the mailing list categories, and I can see which ones that a particular member is currently a part of, and I can add them to them. I could uncheck them and say, well, it's not really an event registrant, but I want to check I'm a vendor, click save. And that person was then removed from the mailing list category that I unchecked them from, and they were added to the one I checked. In addition, let's say you've created a search here somewhere in People Manager, and you have a subset of your membership. Click on this button that says Actions, and now you have options. You can actually create a new mailing list and automatically add all those members returned to that new mailing list. You can add all those members to an existing mailing list. You also could add them to a committee. You could add them to an interest group. So, depending on how you're building your searches and how you want to organize your members, it's kind of a quick way to be able to add people to different things. In addition, let's say you have a list of members, and if you go back to the mailing list categories, there is a way to import members into a mailing list category. So let's say you have an export of your members, and you're going to click on this big button that says import people. It's going to ask you what mailing list category you want to add them to, and it's going to ask you to select the file. Now, what you have to do first is click here to download. You're going to download a template, and the template really only has a few fields in it, and it's basically member number, first name, last name, and the member number is important because it's being used to make sure that that member is so that the system can look up that member and add them to mailing list category based on the member number. Also, most of your chapter websites, I didn't configure all of them. I did do most of them. Actually, no, actually on most of your websites, you have it down here in the lower right corner. But it's basically add me to the mailing list. Excuse me. When you click that, a person who is a non-member will be able to add themselves to your non-member database. And this is great because they may be interested in becoming a vendor or becoming a vendor, or they may be interested in membership in NIGP. And so you create mailing list categories. And when you create those mailing list categories, you have the option, going back to that module here, you have the option to say, do I want that to be part of the add me function? And you can see that here. I'm a vendor, show on add me screen, currently yes. So when I create it or configure it, I either check it and say if I want it to show on add me or not. And then when somebody goes to add me to the mailing list, it'll appear down here. Anybody have any questions about those, about mailing list categories?
See any hands?
Good. Okay. Well, I mean, it's not good. It's just, I'm just saying. Well, I'll move on then.
Moving on. Yep.
Yep. Okay. So under the people tab, there is this option called new member sign up. And it's a little bit misleading because it's also used for renewals. So I'm going to click on it. And one of the things we want to look at, I mean, these are all the things when somebody signs up or when they renew, these are all the pages that are presented to them as part of that process. We internally call it the new member wizard or the renewal wizard. But we check these boxes based on what we want to include. And they're organized by new member sign up wizard or membership renewal wizard. And what do we want for the member to be presented with? And if an admin is working the process, what do we want an admin to have to do? So obviously some things are pre-selected and you can't unselect them. So member type is required, privacy agreement is required, contact information is required. Additional member data questions. So many of your chapters have additional member data questions, like what kind of certifications they currently hold. So you can make that part of the new member sign up or the renewal or both. You can also require attachments. Most of your chapters aren't doing that. But if you're allowing people to add themselves to interest groups, maybe it's for long-term volunteering, then you'd want to make the interest groups module as part of the new member sign up and part of the renewal wizard. If you have chapters that are set up with agency membership, so you have primaries and secondaries configured, then you're also going to want additional members to be part of that new member wizard or the renewal wizard. The joining agreement, I haven't come across a chapter yet that has a joining agreement. One of the other options you can configure is this, which is called first login. And that basically says the very first time somebody logs in, they are required to go through these options. So when I check it, all of a sudden I have new options here under the first login column that I can enable, that I can enforce people to have the very first time they log in. Any subsequent time they log in, they will not be required to fill out this information. This is really handy in the cases where, like, if I do a bulk upload of your membership information, their members are already in the system. So you still want them maybe to go through a first login and verify their contact information and any additional member data questions like their certifications, um, and just verify all that information. So first login is really handy for that. So that one's pretty straightforward, I think. Um, Using the emailing module, and I think I covered this in a couple of office hours, but it may not be very obvious yet. The emailing module is really nice because you can create emailings, and when you create them, you configure them for certain emailing categories. And then you just go to configure categories. You can see your emailing categories. You got webinar announcements, newsletters, suppliers. And when you create the emailing and go to basic info or edit basics, you choose the category that emailing is going to go out. Is it going to be webinar announcements, newsletter, supplier? And this is just for categorizing. And then when you go and take a look at the emailing page, and this is a page where people can look at archived emails, click on emailing, and you can see everything is going to be organized by category. In this case, there's only 2 emailings that are visible, and they're both under the newsletter category. And if I click on it, I can actually look at the emailing that was sent out. So now I have a way to archive these emails that people can look at for future use. So I think that is really, really handy thing to have. Now, one of the things that's come up more recently is, and Google has been kind of a pain in the butt because of that, um, buttons. When it comes to buttons within an email, this is what I call a standard email button. And when I click on the email editor and look at it, if I go and I click on insert link, and I choose a page, let's say it's just a custom page, and I'll go to About Us, and we'll do that, and we create a button, and we're going to call it Training Page 3. It's going to create a button for you, right? The problem is if I send this out to everybody, and some of those people have email packages that won't reproduce buttons very well. I'm specifically talking about Gmail users. Anyone who uses Gmail right now, the buttons won't render very nicely. They render more as text, and you kind of lose you put all that work into creating these buttons and this great looking email, and Gmail won't reproduce it. So what I recommend to make sure that email packages always reproduce a button for you, turn that button into an image. And so what this is just an image of a button. I just called it Register Now. So basically, I created the button here. I made a screenshot, copied it into my image editing software, and just cropped out everything but the image itself and saved it. So now I have a button that's called Register Now. When I build my link, I'm going to click on Insert Link, and I'm going to go to that same page, and I'll say About Us, Training Page 3, and instead of selecting button, I'm going to select Image, and I'm going to look for one. I think I saved it as button. Yep, here's the Register Now button. I select it, save it, and now I can send this out. But it's a live image, it's a linked image. So when people click on it, it's going to take them to where I determined that they're going to go. But it's always going to reproduce because it's just an image. It's just a picture. So Gmail will reproduce it. Any standard email editor that reproduces HTML images will reproduce it. Anyone who's still using text-only emails won't be able to see it either, but they won't be able to see anything. So hopefully that makes sense. That's become quite a sticking point lately, just because Gmail has stopped reproducing our buttons or any buttons that are HTML buttons and just makes them standard link text. Okay, one more thing I want to cover here. I'm going to go back to events, and this is kind of a um, something that's changed relatively recently. If you are setting up your event, you have this option here called emails. And if I click it, it's email confirmations and reminders. And I can set a date at which I send out an email reminder to everyone who's registered, or I can send an email reminder to members to remind them to register. And I can send those out on specific dates. Here's kind of the caveat here is that this is a very, very old part of the event module, and it really doesn't do much. You can add some additional text here. You could put in some Zoom link information, whatever you might want to place. That's perfectly fine. But you have very, very, very limited functionality, and you have incredibly limited distribution lists with this. So what we've done is we've created the emailing module, but we've made it event specific. So if you click on the big button that says emailings, now you have the ability to create an emailing. Looks just like the other emailing module. The big difference is that the distribution lists are very different and they can be event specific. So you can say everyone, let me get rid of that pop-up here. So you can say everyone registered for this event, active members of a specific group, registrants who have paid for the event, registrants who haven't yet paid for the event. So you can remind them, hey, you still need to cough up some money. Registrants with a canceled registration. So you might be able to reach out to them and say, hey, I noticed you canceled your registration. If you decide to register again, I'm going to give you $10 off. I don't know, whatever you want to do. You could email the event contacts, and those are the people who you configured to be the people responsible for the event. You can say, let's see, there's a bunch of other options here. Members in a category, or non-members in a category, members with an answer to a specific club question. So there's a lot of ways you can build an emailing now around the event and have it a lot more functional. The other nice thing is that you can specify a specific date and time for that to go out. So you can say, I want it to go out September 15th at 8 a.m., not necessarily, whenever Club Express decides they want to send it out, like with the regular emailing module or with the regular email reminders. So if I take a look at emails down here, the email confirmations and reminders, you like I said, you're very limited. You can send it out on a date, and it will go out generally around 6 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. Central Time. But you don't have any control over that time period. The other thing is, how do you edit those emails that go out? So if I were to go back to events and go to the event manager, if I click on configure and go to email reminders, this is where those email reminders are created. And you can edit them and you can, have them say whatever you want, but it's going to pre-fill in some information about the event. What's the title, date and time, event location, short description. Here's what I kind of want to warn you against doing. Don't edit this and make it event specific. Because if you do, and you set an event reminder in the future for a different event, it's going to have the wrong event for information on it. So you really want to avoid making this specific for anything, right? So that's why we put these tags in here. So it can be very generic and it'll apply to any event that you're using. So that makes it kind of easy. So you got the event reminder to members, event reminder to registrants, and then the waits list. So if you're using wait list with your event, then this would be the wait list email that goes out.
Michael, we have probably about 5 more minutes. So
Okay.
just to let you know.
Hi, Michael. How are you? I have a question.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to know, is there a way to charge non-members a fee to attend an event? So we have like facility people that we would like to invite to an event that's not currently PPAC members, enhanced or regular membership, but we want to charge them a one-time fee to attend an event. Where do we formulate that at?
Are you going to have them register for the event?
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
So then, yeah, set it up as a, well, this is a multi-active, well, actually, this is a regular event. So this will be good. So you go to who can register, and you're going to add them as a non-member registrant, right? So you'll choose any non-member, and then whatever the display name is that you're going to give them. And then when you set up, oh, this is a multi-activity event too. Now I want to find a single activity event. Is the one you're talking about, is it a multi-activity event or a single activity event?
It's a probably single activity. It's a lunch and learn session.
Yeah. So then what you're going to do is under registration and fees, I got to turn on the option, go down to who can register. So what you're going to do is you're going to say any non-member, you're going to give them the name and then the fee that you're going to charge them. And then when they're registering and they select that, they're going to be charged that fee.
All right. So you did that under the event tab, correct?
Yeah, under events, when you're editing or creating the event, you have an option called who can register. And so you set up the registrant type, any non-member, and then the display name is going to be whatever you're calling them. What is it you called them? You called them something special.
The group, it was our facilities and risk management team, but
Okay, yeah,
it'll
just call
probably be
them.
various. Yeah. Okay.
So just call them facilities or something like that. And you're going to charge them $25 to attend.
Okay.
And then click add, and then they'll be charged that when they select that when they register.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sure. Yep, you're welcome.
So Michael, thank you. This has been amazing. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I don't know if anybody on the call has any questions for Michael we have another 4 minutes or so. So if anybody has any questions about what Michael covered, or perhaps not, but
Yeah.
I don't, a quiet bunch today, Michael. So
Yeah.
I don't see any hands up. Michael, thank you for doing this yet again.
Yep, you're welcome.
And thank you to everyone for joining us. We will be doing this again on the second Tuesday of the month in September. So I hope you all will join us. There will be a recording. So we did record this, and I will put that in our YouTube channel so everyone will have access to it after the fact. We did get requests for people on site to have this recorded. So I will put that there for everyone's review. So thank you everyone for joining. And have a great rest of the day.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.